Mr. President, I would first like to thank my colleagues for working with Senator Flake and myself to bring this proposal forward. This is a critical issue, one that really gets straight to the heart of our American democracy. The current investigations of the IRS clearly show it is not an overreaction, I don't think, to say that the Internal Revenue Service did suppress political opposition. Now, to Kansans, to Arizonans, to Texans, to Utahns, all across the country, and to my colleagues, this is not only a scandal, but one that is egregious. There is a great deal more than a smidgen at stake here. It gets right to the heart of our system of government. The government must be held accountable for its actions and must never be permitted to trample on the constitutional rights of our citizens. The behavior of the IRS in singling out select groups at their discretion for extra scrutiny and harassment just because they hold views that differ from the administration is simply outrageous. Worse, the IRS continues to target groups whose politics it doesn't like, even as we speak here on the floor of the Senate. And in fact, the proposed IRS 501c4 regulations will even more directly prevent groups the IRS doesn't favor from really participating in the political process. The proposed regulations would place much tougher controls on what would be considered political activity, effectively blocking the normal practice of a wide range of not-for-profit organizations, not only conservatives. Under the proposed rules, healthy debate and discussion of political issues, political candidates, and congressional actions would be prohibited. This is, in effect, suppression of free speech for these Americans. The proposed regulations would result in continued sanctioned intimidation and harassment of these groups and permit the federal government to be used as a partisan tool. We recently learned that the proposed regulations have been under development for some time. Senator Flake has just mentioned this. This is nothing new, perhaps as far back as 2011, some say even 2010. Now these proposed regulations, until recently, have been considered offline. My colleagues, pay attention to this, offline. Offline means that the regs are being considered outside the normal regulatory process, which in my view has been done in order to circumvent the Administrative Procedures Act. There's no transparency here. I cannot help but think that all of this, the targeting, the slow walking of exemption applications, the proposed regulations are part of a calculated plan to deny unfavored groups their First Amendment right to participate in the political process of the nation. My colleagues, this is simple. What we are seeing is a deliberate effort to infringe the people's First Amendment rights. It's incredible. I never thought I would live to see the day that this happened in the United States, that we would have to be debating this. This is a copy of the Constitution of the United States, First Amendment by James Madison. This was given to me by Robert C. Byrd, the institutional flame of the Senate, who sat right over there to the left of the distinguished ranking member from Utah, and I know that who is our Republican lead in regards to the investigation of all of this in the Finance Committee. Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof or abridging the freedom of speech, my colleagues, or the press, or the right of the people peaceably to assemble and to petition the government for a redress of grievances. As former chair of the Intelligence Committee, I can tell you that the arrogant response of the administration to the IRS actions, the denials, the evasions, the attempts to downgrade the implications of the IRS efforts, and now counter-accusations, they look like they came from some counter-espionage handbook. Here's the real problem. The IRS has proposed these regulations before Congress has even completed, as the senator from Arizona has pointed out, its investigation of the agency's actions in these matters. The manner in which these regulations have come up raised questions about the integrity of the rulemaking process, the exact opposite direction the agency should be taking. Even worse, the IRS proceeds with these rules when they have done as much as possible to slow down the Finance Committee's investigation. I'm a member of that committee. Senator Hatch is leading the effort on the Republican side by responding to document requests at a glacial pace at best and redacting large amounts of critical information. Now, Senator Flake and I have really proposed a very straightforward, very common sense approach to this entire mess. We simply halt further action on the proposed regulations until the Justice Department and the congressional investigations by the House Ways and Means Committee and the Senate Finance Committee into the IRS actions are complete. The bill freezes further IR action for 1 year and would make it clear that the IRS can only enforce the regulations that were in place before all this mess began. It is no wonder, given the IRS's behavior, that Kansans and virtually every American with every good reason doubt that the agency can in good faith administer not only this, but the tax code. Clearly, the IRS has no capacity to regulate any political activity without running roughshod over the people's fundamental constitutional rights. I have said this many times, but the scandal also shows the IRS is too big, too intrusive, and too involved in taxpayers' business. The time for us to scale it back is now. In fact, it's easily the most distrusted agency in the federal government. That's a shame. The IRS has become a four-letter word. This growing lack of faith in the IRS is a very strong reason why Congress should consider a wholesale rewrite of the tax system by simplifying tax collection and reducing the government's intrusion into economic and other affairs of the public. This is the main reason I am supporting legislation to scrap the tax code and move to a simplified single-rate tax system. We do not need the IRS regulating constitutionally guaranteed free speech and muzzling lawful activity in regards to politics and taking part as a partner in government. Will Rogers once said, "The difference between death and taxes is that death doesn't get worse every time Congress meets." Well, today Will Rogers is wrong. It's not Congress that's making things worse, it's the IRS. So let's pass this bill and work to get the IRS out of Americans' lives and their freedom of speech. And I thank Senator Flake again for being a co-sponsor of the legislation.